loading.
Oh, now it's live. Look at that.
Look at that. So welcome to the Fight Mind chat where Jesse and I will be answering your question. Jesse, how you been, my man?
I've been all right. I just got home from training like maybe 30 minutes ago. Ate myself a nice fat pork leg and cheese sandwich, double egg. So feeling good, feeling a little bloated, a little sore, but not complaining.
Oh,
How
nice.
about
We
you?
already got some questions in.
Oh, hell yeah. I cannot see them. Are they on YouTube, I'm assuming?
All right, yeah, they are on YouTube. Here, I'll put one up. Let me know if you can see it.
Shit.
Oh, look at that.
That's really cool.
All right. So here, we'll start with this one. What do you think? So James Kendrick, our boy James, what
The
do you
boy,
think
the
of the
absolute guy.
people? Yeah, what do you think of the people that are saying Weili cheated against Suarez by greasing? And the reason Weili won was because Suarez had a big cut on her knee. Okay, so he's
Yeah.
coming off hot like he normally does. I mean, James probably one of the most passionate guys I know. So you want to start this off?
Oh man, I was going to defer to your expertise, but I will say, firstly, I did not know that there were dudes even saying that. Secondly, very, very silly because if you watch the fight itself, if you watch the tape, it's like not substantiated in any way. You can't really make much of a case. Like, listen, a cut on her knee is not going to make you do a bunch of dumb shit and like run yourself on the counters and force bad shots or anything like that. Like, if anything, that's going to, force you to not shoot as badly from as far out as frequently. And the greasing thing is just, I don't think these people know what greasing actually is or have ever seen someone that's legitimately greased because it doesn't look like that. I can tell you that much,
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So here's what I think about these claims. There's a lot of people that just like to clown Zhang Weili. Like, it happens to you when you win a lot and defend your titles multiple times. You're going to get a lot of people that just don't like you. So when there's an opportunity to say something negative about Weili, they're going to say it, whether it's true or not. And like this specific one, I think I know what he's referring to, which is one of the losers at WMMA. One of the losers that have a WMMA YouTube channel where all they talk about is WMMA.
The
And I think
absolute
it's
intellectual giants that they are.
yes, the geniuses that they are. And I think this claim that she was greasing and another reason why she lost is because of the cut on her knees. I think that's just hilarious with a tinge of hypocrisy and irony, because I think these are the same people that said Carla would win against her, Lemos would win against her, and Jan would win against her. Like,
Yeah,
it's
it's
never
starting to see a
anything.
pattern.
Yeah, it's never anything that Weili prepared or executed or anything she did. It's just her opponents were either washed, injured, unmotivated, or underprepared when they lose. And it's always this type of damage control after Weili dismantles these girls. I think this is funny because underprepared and undermotivated is the funniest one, because you're telling me the last 5 opponents Weili fought spent a full training camp not looking at tape and didn't want to win the belt. Like, just silly stuff. Like, sorry for the
It
rant.
happens.
What do you think of that, Jesse?
I mean, I do think it's a little bit hilarious, and like to your point, it does speak to this kind of like damage control PR initiative because it happens every time there's like a dominant champion. Everyone who's not a fan of that fighter is instantly preying on the downfall, saying they were never that good to begin with. This next guy's going to do it. The next guy after that's going to do it. Just really trying to like downplay the significance of a certain fighter just because of their success. Which kind of speaks to like a general thing about like the fans of this sport, or really the fans of any sport. But to your point, it's just like you can't, you have to at some point take your head out of your ass a little bit and say like, all right, it's beyond improbable. It's almost like mathematically impossible that the last 5 opponents have all just not studied, just not come prepared, just not trained all that seriously. It's like, at some point you have to kind of see the light and go like, you know what, maybe this is just like a skill thing. Maybe, in the example of Suarez, like maybe this fighter wasn't really in their peak form, they shouldn't have been challenging for the belt at this stage of their career, considering like the injuries, the yada yada. But it's like that shouldn't take anything away from the performance that Weili had or the performances that Weili's had. So I just think it's like a very silly thing with fans in general, and like, you know, again, sort of the intellectual insecurity I've talked about before.
Yeah, and probably the last thing before we like move on from this, like that thing you said, like not in peak form. Like at the end of the day, like if like none of these fighters are coming in injured all the time.
Yeah,
So
every single time.
and it's like the moment in time where they are in peak form, sometimes if they won't fight somebody who is in peak form. So like at the end of the day, like what like if people keep saying like, oh, this girl was washed when she fought her, what was the point of even fighting at that point, right?
Yeah. And it's, you know, to your point, like everyone's coming in injured all the time. It's just degrees of severity. So it's like, you know, once you're kind of aware of that, that excuse loses a lot of its, you know, merit.
Right.
So it's just
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
it's really, it's just like grand scale excuse making. So people can kind of justify their own feelings of like, you know, well, I would have been right if it weren't for this thing that doesn't actually exist and didn't actually play a factor in the fight. It's just, you know, very kind of silly, like ego massaging thing that people do when they're wrong.
Yep. All right, I think that's good. I think we should move on to the next question because I think this is a good one by Sammy. So Sammy Arnett,
Hey,
he's a protect your neck. He's on protect your neck, and I've seen him around MMA Mania and Drake Briggs' old shows on Sound and Pound. So listen to the pod with Muay Thai Jabs yesterday. How does one develop good fundamentals on their own without a coach? Ooh, that's a good question.
yeah, I mean that, in my opinion, it's going to be a little bit difficult, but not impossible necessarily. I think, you know, the first step towards that is, you know, rounding out that kind of education on the fundamentals, which of course is going to be infinitely easier with a coach, with someone actually telling you, correcting you, because, you know, there's a lot you can learn from instructionals, from YouTube videos, stuff like that, but it's not going to be the same. And when you're trying it on your own, you're not going to have that guiding force to tell you, like, you know, tuck your elbow in, you know, move your feet a little bit further apart, you know, because it's not necessarily intuitive to kind of know where your weight is at unless you've had like a very long athletic career in other sports. Um, but there are like a lot of good sources out there in terms of who is it? There's this guy on YouTube that was back on the Reddit r/MMA. I think he's got like 50 followers or something like that, but always would put up good like technique foundational videos of like basically just, you know, how to have your stance, how to kind of feel out where your weight is, stuff like that. You know, just so you're comfortable, you're rooted, you're not like, you know, doing things wrong. Cause I think that's the most dangerous thing in guys who attempt to self train is it's like without that element of guidance in terms of a coach, you know, you might be doing things wrong and then creating, you know, a foundation. Like think of building a house. If you try and pour a concrete slab on your own and you don't know what you're doing, odds are there's going to be some cracks. There's going to be some like settling of the concrete or whatever. Anything that you try building on top of that later on, eventually it's going to run into issues. It's going to start to, you know, crumble, break down, have whatever might happen to it. And yeah, I think that's the same with like fundamentals, where if you're building on, you know, a poor foundation, nothing can really work well on top of it. So you have to, you know, theoretically like go back, like work backwards if you start going to a coach and everything, and like diagnose those kind of core fundamental issues before being able to actually grow in any, you know, meaningful way. But to answer the question without a long rant, it's like there are some very good resources out there. There's a lot of guys putting out good content, and there's another whole discussion to be had about like vetting who your sources are, like, you know, learning from good sources rather than like popular sources. So I know a lot of people watch like who's the fight tips guy on YouTube.
Oh yeah, Shane, the fight
Yeah,
tips
yeah.
guy. Yeah.
And while I think he has put out some pretty good content in the past, it's like that is not a supplement for, you know, a coach or anything like that. I think if I recall correctly, a lot of his, you know, content is kind of very basic and not in a way that's like necessarily rounding out those core competencies, those like core fundamentals. So I would say if you have the funds or anything like that, I know that what is it on dynamic striking, as well as like BJJ Fanatics Wrestling. There's a bunch of really good instructionals, including some very like basic fundamental ones. But again, those are not cheap. But if you know how to pirate, you might be the next Joseph Chen. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. So Muay Thai Jabs did say this yesterday, but like let's understand what like the fundamentals he did mention were like stature and posture. I think that's like the most basic stuff that he mentioned. I think you have to understand what those are first,
Yeah,
and then like without a coach, like again, there's no substitute for a coach, but he did say you shadow boxing and using a mirror, right?
yeah. But so that's that is something that is very, very useful, especially like just in terms of getting your movement down, getting your timing, stuff like that. You can play with a lot of things, especially in terms of like angles. You can kind of simulate different things coming back at you, force different conditions. But to my earlier point is like if your footwork isn't really there, if you're just doing things based on like the way that you've interpreted from watching tape, from watching YouTube videos or whatever, and it's not necessarily correct, that might harm you in the long run if you do start going to a gym and they're going, okay, wait, you're not doing this right. We have to work backwards. And once you have those established like patterns and everything, and that, those neural networks or whatever, where this is how you understand footwork is because this is how you've been doing it for 6, 8, however many months, it's really hard to kind of work backwards from there, right?
Right. And for those that don't know, let's actually mention some of the fundamentals that Muay Thai Jabs talked about.
Mhm.
So the first one he said was stature and posture, where you're in a good position to throw from, which is balance. The second one was footwork. He mentioned the cross on the ground, so like knowing where your feet are supposed to be doing when you're punching. And
Yeah,
then
just
the
doing
last
like
one,
four square drills, stuff like that.
yeah, like Jesse, you can explain that later, but and then the last one is your hands in the right spot after you throw a punch. So like, those are the three fundamental things that he mentioned. Uh, those are the three fundamentals that he mentioned that will like take you a long way when you first start out striking, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's, one of those is going to be a lot easier to work in terms of like keeping your hands where they're supposed to be. Like if you're shadow boxing in the garage or whatever, anytime you're throwing your jab, just make sure it comes back. Don't be Sean Strickland. Don't throw it out, drop it, and then bring it back. Out and back, out and back. Things like that can genuinely be very beneficial in terms of like, again, for lack of a better term, creating those kind of neural networks, creating those patterns, that habit of every time you throw, bring it right back. Because that's, that's a very easy thing to work on. And I think in doing that, you might be able to, kind of figure out your weight a little bit more because all of that stuff is, you know, there's a degree of coaching required. I would say a pretty high degree. And if you want to like, actually be good necessarily, but, you can feel these things out. Like, if you're taking a step and you feel that your weight is too far back, you can identify that, you can diagnose that, you can, play around with it. It's really, there's a lot of maneuverability, mobility. You have, you know, infinite room to kind of grow and advance. So it's like, you're not stuck in any specific like developmental path, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think using a mirror is one of your the mirror is one of your best coaches. Like if you don't have one, like the mirror, shadow boxing, those are things that you can do on your own, right?
Yeah. And especially like I'll for myself, excuse me, when I was like first starting to strike, I used to like my posture was shit, but I thought it was good because I was just focusing on trying to keep my shoulders up and in effect was like bending my back a little bit. So when I'd be shadow boxing in front of the mirror, I'd be like, wait, that doesn't look right. And then trying to, play around with it, feel it out where it looks better, and then figuring out how to make that kind of feel better, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, I think we we covered that one in depth. So let's move on to the next question. Oh, from our boy Jimmy Kudo.
Hey,
So so if you don't know who Jimmy Kudo is, he's a Protect Your Neck regular, also in the Drake Riggs Discord. So yeah, does good stuff that you guys probably don't know about. So anyway, Jimmy Kudo says, Ghost, why do you hate the GOAT conversation? Jesse, where do you put Zhang Weili in the GOAT conversation for 115? Since I know Ghost doesn't care.
I think he's trying to stir up a little bit of drama here, and I appreciate
He
it.
is. All right, you can go first, because I think this is a good question, because you know who Open Note is, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he wrote up a good piece. So let me just bring that up while you answer it first, yeah?
All right. Well, so if we're keeping it specifically to women's strawweight, I'd say probably at number one, considering, the other options are like, Rose and Carla and, Joanna. So I guess it's either, I'm saying Weili, Joanna, I guess Rose and Carla would be tied. And then everyone else that's ever fought in that division is a distant fifth and beyond, I guess. I just, if we're talking like an overall GOAT conversation, I will agree that I think those are kind of silly. But I think it's a little bit difficult to kind of gauge where WMMA fighters fit into GOAT conversation, considering, the sort of the nascency of the women's divisions in the UFC, in like, the elite level promotions, as well as sort of the shallowness of a lot of these divisions historically. But I think that's a little off topic.
Yeah, so Open Note Grapple, he wrote a piece called Goats, Gordon Ryan, and Athlete Asterisks. And so I'm gonna read the tweet that I sent out, or that I put in the Francisco Trinaldo GOAT satire thread that I did. But it says, it explains why dissecting an athlete's career and boiling down to numbers takes away from enjoying their performances. So what Open Note said was, summing up an athlete's entire career and life with a single number, or trying to erase one with an asterisk, negates why we enjoy the sport in the first place. The performance. Titles and numbers are fine for selling points, but once you're sold that, just enjoy the show. Obsessing over numbers prevents us from watching, enjoying, and learning from the performance that makes humans into heroes. Over a long enough time, everyone loses and no one is without critic. So why be one? So
Yeah.
I think that was beautifully said by Open Note Grappling, who you guys should definitely follow. But the reason I hate the GOAT debate is because it's useless. It's just talking points that pundits use when they can't talk about anything else. And like I said before on Blaine's show and the last Fight Mind series, the debate is just for eliciting reactions, right? Right, Jesse? Like it's just
it doesn't do anything productive. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just saying, this is my opinion, and that's it,
Yeah, like at the end of the day, like to me, it doesn't matter who the GOAT is at 115. Like the whole, is it Weili? Is it Joanna? Is it Rose who's the greatest? I mean, it literally doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, it doesn't affect anything. It has no bearing over the fights themselves. And it's honestly like a greater point that I think Val and I have touched on before in Cagecraft is, it's like, it's almost unfair to try and gauge fighters on like a GOAT list during their career, at least. Because it's like, you're not letting things pan out the way that they're going to, and you're trying to kind of project their placement in the grand scheme of things while they're still actively competing and stuff like that. So it's like, it's almost unfair, because, if you're looking at a guy in his prime, you might say, this is the greatest fighter ever. 2-3 years down the road, he's losing 3-4 in a row. Now you're saying, okay, he was never that good to begin with. Like, to Open Note's point is, it's like, you're not appreciating what's there in front of you. You're not actually like enjoying the performances we've got while we got them. And you're just trying to, contextualize it in some stupid list that doesn't matter. Right.
Right. And like, to me as a scout, as somebody who scouts, like what's important to me is whether or not Weili wins, or whether or not she's improving from fight to fight. That's what matters to me. Like, I don't know. I know most people don't care about that, but that's what's important to me, at least. And like the GOAT debate, it has like you said, it has no bearing on anything whatsoever. Like, I don't care how Weili's legacy stacks up to any fighter. Like, who in the end cares, right?
Yeah, you're not making money off a legacy, right?
Right, exactly. Like, and here's another thing. Like, there's people that are gonna tell you that, oh, Rose is the greatest of all time because of this, this, and this. There's is that gonna change is that gonna change their opinion? No.
No.
There's gonna be people that are gonna tell you that Joanna's the greatest of all time. Are you gonna change their opinion? No. So why do these guys waste their time arguing? Like, who cares? None of that matters. All three have done great things, and that's the whole point, right?
Yeah, and one doesn't detract from the other. Saying like Weili's had a great career, saying Joanna had a great career, that doesn't take anything away from the other. Both things can exist simultaneously. Like they both have had great careers, and that's something that we as fans, as people that like enjoy the sport, should be able to enjoy rather than like bicker amongst ourselves about it. It's just stupid.
Right, exactly. Like, yeah, I really don't understand why people care. Like, now I'm addressing the whole fan base and like the people who talk about MMA. Like, why do they have like? I don't understand why they need to care about that. Like, it's so confusing to me. Like why that would matter to anyone. Like, at the end of the day, you're not going to convince the person you're talking to, right?
It's just something to talk about, really. It's you know, it's a way to say, look at my opinion. My opinion is valued. It matters. I'm knowledgeable. You're not. Without ever having to go beyond the surface level and do anything that resembles analysis or actually like critiquing skill sets.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think that's the way the sport is covered today is like after every single event, it's a goat talk, right?
Yeah, well, and every single fighter that wins a belt or defends it once is all of a sudden, are they the goat? Are they going to be the goat? Who gives a shit?
Exactly. Like, can we just celebrate the performances that they just had? Can we talk about like what made that performance good? Like, why can't we
Yeah,
just do that, right?
yeah. And for the record, I feel the same way about pound for pound lists. Like another just wasted like thought, effort, mental energy wasted on nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, I think it's more important to enjoy like what a fighter does. I mean, this might be a hot take, but yeah, I think it's more important to enjoy what a fighter does during the course of their career rather than worry about how their resume stacks up with somebody else that's also done amazing things, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think reason for why these kind of goat debates continue even still is just that like people want things to be objective. They want them to be concrete where, as Jab said succinctly yesterday, like fighting is the grayest sport of all time. There's absolutely no black or white. There's no, concrete rules, concrete, um, laws that dictate, what makes one greater than the other. So I think it's just people's way of like introducing some degree of quote unquote like objectivity that doesn't exist. It's just saying, you know, this is exactly how it ranks up when it's like this is defined based on your metrics that are just based on, more or less vibes or like certain observations you may have made throughout someone's career that might not be the case for someone else, right?
I completely agree. And on that note, I think it's time to move on to the next question. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
So, oh, got a technical one from James Kendrick, our boy James Kendrick.
Ooh.
Is it hard to get down blocks in MMA since you also have to be defensively responsible for strikes? Ooh,
Do you want to start with this one?
yeah, I'll start with this one.
Hell
So,
yeah.
I think like what James is talking about, I think it comes down to distance management. The place where down blocks occur is, I think, when you're at borders. So it's definitely difficult to down block and remain defensively responsible in the pocket, but at borders when you can see the shot coming, I think that's where you can get a good down block. So like I think it's a really specific context. So like if a guy is shooting for borders like with no setup whatsoever, like you don't have to worry about defending like wild overhands. Like down blocks are there all day. Like I think it's a lot more complicated if you're in the pocket on the tracks with your opponent. Like what do you think, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, striking defense and wrestling defense are about as antithetical as it gets. Like they do not meld together very well at all, considering you have to have your body positioned in completely, opposing ways. So yeah, to your point, like in the pocket, think of like an actually very crafty offensive wrestler in an MMA context, someone that's like boxing their way into takedowns or whatever. Like if they're in the pocket and you're worrying about shots coming at you, it's going to be harder to get down blocks. if you're a guy like Josh Van, for example, or Jack Della Maddalena, who when you're on the offense and you're, throwing to the body, stuff like that, keeping your hands a little bit lower naturally, it's easier to get those, considering that, like, you're forcing guys to shoot on worse terms. So you're getting these slightly more exaggerated shots, these shots that are generally a little bit worse. They have like poor posture, a little bit worse penetration typically, considering like the difficulties of shooting off the back foot, especially, in the context of like a sort of swarmer. So, those are really good opportunities to get your down blocks. But if you're the guy on the back foot, it's going to be a lot harder because, for those who aren't aware, traditional down block in wrestling is like, you're essentially, because you're a lot lower, you're basically like touching your fingers to the mat essentially as a way of like stopping them from getting any kind of penetration. So you can transition that to your underhooks really easily. So like in an MMA context, there's not many situations where you're going to be that low in your stance, that close to the ground. And B, you're not going to really want to be taking your hands all the way away from your face down towards like your knees and hips and whatever. So yes, I think it is difficult. And that's sort of like the benefit of having a good layered striking and offensive wrestling game. But it's not impossible either, if that's not too much of a cop out.
Right. And I think this is important too, because we have strikes and the threat of the rear hand, like we often square up our hips. So it's gonna be like if you swing on somebody and they duck under you, like it's like especially if you've committed to it, like you're not gonna down block on that.
Yeah, not well at least.
Yeah, not well. So yeah, I think that was a good question. Let's move on. So Rainiel Urge, haven't seen this name yet. Can transitional striking be trained or is it a feel thing?
It can definitely be trained. I will say it's something that I try and incorporate a lot in my own training. Especially in terms of like going from, the outside where you're striking in the pocket, transitioning that in, throw a right hand, swim that into an underhook, transition your jabbing hand, lead hand into a collar tie or whatever, as well as the other way around. If I'm working my wall wrestling and I'm digging underhooks and everything, I'll be looking for head positioning, finding little opportunities to post and elbow on, I'll have my coach holding pads and whatever. So it's definitely something that can be worked, especially like in that interplay of striking, wrestling, clinching, all of that. It's just you're going to have to get a little bit creative, I think, in your training.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's both. Like it can be trained and it's also a feel thing. Like
Definitely.
there's some fighters that actually do have a natural feel for transitional striking, but at the same time, I believe there's certain positions where transitional striking can occur, like mainly along the fence or in between, like getting up. So yeah, let's talk about that. Like clinch positions along the fence, like you can walk through those positions like in training, and then you can feel and see where the striking opportunities are.
Yeah. And again, because a lot of those positions are a little bit more static, they're a little bit like slower moving as opposed to, out in open space, you get a little bit more time to kind of find those windows. Like, if you're getting that little inside tie on the bicep and you can dig your head position and get a little bit of separation, you can kind of naturally see, okay, I can slot a knee in here. I can transition this to, the frame into like a hook or an elbow or something like that. There is a degree of intuition, because in those positions, it's kind of a little bit more static. You're feeling things a lot more. But it is something that I think can advance a lot more should guys be training it regularly, right?
Yeah, and so I think you mentioned out in the open, right? I think the real secret to transitional hitting like out in the open, especially on the ground or in the clinch, is when the opponent moves or try to change position. Like
Yep.
when you can feel that change of position or that movement, that's your time to strike, or that's your time to find a strike, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, especially in the open for transitional striking. I think it's more intuitive against the cage, and that's where like a lot of guys are typically finding success. But I think there's like a lot of opportunity in open space. So actually a topical example is it Ursega Moreno? I forget. I watched tape on both of them a few days ago, but I think it's Urseg has found a lot of success in, at least in the Pantoja fight, and even the Cara France fight to a lesser degree, but like from these sort of long exaggerated entries where guys are just, stepping in, swinging their head low, coming over with an overhand. He'll come in, get that long guard, catch it on the arm, transition that to the little gooseneck inside tie, catch the collar tie, throw a knee, throw an elbow, throw a strike, something, and break away. And that's something that I can see what we see. Like, you can maintain that. You can keep that ball rolling. You can capture those tie ups and convert them to, underhooks, and then keep kind of rinsing and repeating, going like, clinch, strike, break, clinch, strike, break, takedown, stuff like that, really differentiating the kind of layers. But we'll see how things shake up over the next couple of years in that sense, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because I think that's what we're missing in MMA right now, right? Like that.
Yeah.
Like striking into collar ties. Like there's some people that do it, but they don't like when they get the long clinch, as Slacky calls it,
Mhm.
they don't find opportunities to actually strike there, right? They just
Yeah.
it's like when they get their hands on you, it's suddenly just wrestling.
Yeah. And that's exactly what makes it so exploitable, is like you get the brain kind of thinking one thing and then you go with the other. It's sort of kind of lines up with James's question earlier of like, down blocks and striking defense being a little bit at odds with one another. If you get someone down blocking and you're coming over with an overhand, for like a bit of an extreme example, you're in a really good position. Same can be said for transitional striking, that kind of stuff. That's why I rate it so highly, because it's like constantly disadvantaging your opponent, and it's just giving them, additional layers to kind of be sifting through as they're trying to make their own reads, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And let's move on to the next question, which this is kind of funny from Rio. I think you know Rio, right?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah. So he says, "Why is the Malkoun single so powerful, and is there a counter to it?" You want to start us off?
So the Malkoun single is so powerful because it's the Malkoun single. Anyone else can shoot a head outside single, but it's not going to be the Malkoun single. But actually, what he does very well, I think, is he maintains really good posture a lot of the times, and he seems to have like a very strong grip. So he'll typically, when he's shooting head inside, he's keeping his back straight, forehead kind of pressing into the chest, so forcing the shoulders back behind the hips. So from there, it's inherently a little bit more difficult just to keep your balance. Like a lot of single leg defense, you'll see guys just kind of jumping up on one leg. They can do that because they have balance. But so what Malkoun does well is he kind of negates that right away, and then he can go head outside and dump it, or he can, go head outside, go to his high crotch and lift, depending on what positions he's in. But for a genuine answer, it's because he actually does some pretty intelligent things with it and keeps, very strong fundamentals. I especially love the way that he'll go head outside on it and then dump with that little inside trip. I think that's, another layer to that kind of off balancing thing that he's proven to be quite good at.
Yeah, and Slacky mentioned this, but the Malkoun single, like you mentioned the inside, you also mentioned the inside trip, right? He said that it's powerful because of the fence. Like in regular wrestling, there's no fence, so you can just hop backwards. Which Fenyo
Yeah.
mentioned this before, but DC actually used to use the Malkoun single, which is funny, but he used to use this a lot. Like he'd do it in open space because heavyweights would just fall over.
Yep.
So yeah. So and is there any counter to it? I'll start this off, but
Yeah.
I think the counter to I think you'll agree with this, but just square up, get the whizzer, get your
Yeah.
head underneath the opponent's chin, and probably the most important bit is you have to be parallel or your back is away from the fence, so you have space to hop back on the balls of your foot, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'd say another option against the cage specifically is like, for whatever reason, there's this weird misconception that you can't limp leg against the cage. You can.
Mhm.
Guys have done it
Yeah.
for over a decade now, I think. So conceivably, you can limp leg, and like, to the initial point about like the head positioning and posture, that's, goal number one. Start stuffing that head, break that posture, and then everything else from there is a lot easier. right?
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, so yeah, those are two really good options for you, which apparently middleweights haven't figured out yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, come on, it's middleweight.
Yeah, or and heavyweight.
True.
Yeah,
And light heavyweight, we'll throw them in there too, because
yeah,
yeah,
the
Baron.
heavy classes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Ooh, new face. So first of all, welcome, Malcolm. So
Oh,
Malcolm
hell yeah.
asked, a bit ago, I asked Cagecraft Podcast about key locks. Hit them lots in practice, but never see it in fights. Was told it was a big guy sub. I'm small. What are some small guy alternatives from side control? Ooh, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I like this question, and I do remember answering it on Cagecraft. And while it is still largely like a big guy sub, yeah, it's not to say that you don't actually have a really good key lock. Because some guys just really figure out the mechanics of some submissions very well, and like, you'll see it throughout the career. They're just dialed in on one specific kind of weird sub. But in terms of other options, should guys be able to kind of like straighten the arm out, get their hips back, stuff like that, one of my favorite options from side control. Again, I'm not like the biggest guy. I'm not the smallest guy either, but I do a lot off the crossface, and that's how I set up my head and arm choke or my head and arm triangle. So keep heavy pressure on the crossface with the shoulder, and then start just slowly digging under the far side of the elbow. Start working it over, transition the cross-facing arm, get a grip, and then knee on belly pass, get the head and arm choke, and then step off if needed. From side control, there's a lot of different things you can do. Realistically, you can try stapling an arm going to the crucifix. You can something that I actually find a lot of success with is I'll give a little bit of space from side control, so make guys start thinking that they have a room to kind of work their hips back in or go the turtle. Excuse me. And a lot of times, as they're looking for that, they'll start posting and framing. And from there, that's when I'm, pummeling that elbow over, throwing up my Dars. That's how I find a lot. I consider that like a bit of a transitional grappling attack, get guys looking for one thing. And then that's when I'm like kind of setting up a lot of my chokes. But that's a long winded answer to say, feel it out. There's a lot of different options, whatever works for you. Figure it out, dial it in. You're good to go, you know?
Yeah, and to build off the crossface, like Open Note mentioned this, like going for the crossface, going for a head and arm choke. That's like high percentage stuff, right? Like
Yeah,
even if it doesn't hit, like you can move on to different positions from there. So
exactly.
just even in like attempting it, or like I mean the heavy crossface, that's like something that's really fundamental, right? Like
Yeah,
when you first start out jujitsu, like that's the first thing you should learn from side control. Heavy on the crossface,
yeah.
right?
Because that's and as opposed to like a key lock or something where you're, using both hands to attack one and they still have their hips pretty mobile and can make them, they can free their hips very easily, for lack of a better word.
Right. And with the crossface, they can't turn into you, right?
Yeah, it's all control, and that's sort of like the basis of everything. You would rather, or I would rather keep control and open up more sub or submission opportunities for myself rather than try and sell out on something that I might lose, and then in effect, you know, if they can regard, great. Now we have to start over again. It's not
Mhm.
easy to get to side control. Typically, it requires a good amount of effort and energy if you're going against a good guard player. So I like to try to maximize those opportunities, stay there for as long as I can, and cook things if I can.
Oh yeah,
I
and
don't
like
like.
mentioning slow cooking, stapling the arm for crucifix transition, right?
Hmm.
Like you mentioned this earlier, but I think that's a great option because even if you don't get it, like they might turtle
Yeah,
and you'll get the front headlock and you'll be in a different position. Because I mean, side control is a very like it's I think it's more of a transitional position if you give them space, right?
yeah, oh, definitely. And
So
that's
yeah.
that's where I find a lot of my own success in training, just because I'm not really like the strongest guy, but I do try to think a little bit. So that's why I've developed like a really decent I don't want to say good, but a decent front headlock series. So if I'm an inside control, if I can't get the crossface going, if they're keeping really good defense, that's when I like to give them that little bit of space. So guys will start looking to turtle, start going to half guard or whatever, and I can just rinse and repeat. They go to turtle, front headlock series, back takes, go behinds, all of that. So I think to the earlier point, it's like you want more high percentage offense than you want those kind of freak subs, I guess.
Yeah, and and you said you're a smaller guy, right? I think the crucifix is perfect for you because crucifix typically really good for the smaller guy, right? Against the bigger one, because you have more control of that arm.
Yeah, and even if they have these gigantic, super strong arms and they can keep kind of working out, it kind of relates to like the center of gravity. You're going to be a little bit more compact, so you're keeping your weight, more centrally located on basically those arms, that crucifix position, whereas they're going to have to do a lot more to try and it doesn't necessarily matter if their hips are mobile because they're keeping the shoulders, the upper body pinned. So they're going to have to address that before anything else, and you have a lot more different control and finishing opportunities from there, I think.
All right.
Just don't get bench pressed off. That would be embarrassing.
Yeah, just don't get bench pressed off. So the next question is from Sammy again. Training methods to improve cage craft. Ooh.
Okay, this ties in pretty well to something I mentioned earlier. The 4-square drills, just doing a lot of different things just to really master those kind of like core concepts of footwork, get those reps in, for lack of a better term, just, getting that familiarity with your angles, with actually like cage cutting, stuff like that. Those are all things that you can do on your own shadow boxing,
Yeah. And so to add fit drills, right? So like without throwing any strikes, without doing any other thing, just like cut the cage off against a training partner in your fighting environment, right?
Yeah, fit-ins, that kind of thing, just like feeling it out. Because you don't necessarily need a training partner to be able to work on your cage craft. It's going to be a lot more beneficial, I think, considering you're getting that element of resistance. But should you be at home with nothing better to do, you can just imagine an opponent and basically just shadow box and really focus on like if they're circling to their left, how am I going to cut more effectively? And then if they're switching it up, what are your options? Are you going to like try and switch stance and work on like hurling shots, stuff like that? Or are you focusing just on maintaining those angles?
I think this brings up another important conversation. Like, I think it's actually easier, like, tell me if I'm wrong, but it might be easier to work on defensive cage craft on your own than it is offensive cage craft. Because offensive cage craft,
you're gonna need a good imagination.
Yeah, you're gonna need a good imagination because you have to know where the boundary is, right? Like it's hard to imagine doing that like in like any type of surface. But with defensive cage craft, like you can do that anywhere, right?
Yeah. You really all you need to imagine is basically every directional movement you're taking, someone is trying to cut off, right? So it's a lot easier to kind of hammer those things home and even develop a little bit of that like next level kind of craftiness just by kind of projecting the opposite of what you're doing onto an imaginary figure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think with cagecraft, like in general, like I think Miguel mentioned this before, but it's not good in MMA, right? Because everybody's training in groups.
Yeah.
Which is the culture today, but you need I think you need like to be in the cage. Like if you really want to improve your cage craft, you need to be in the cage and you need a training partner. Because like we've said before, like fighting's a relationship, right?
Yeah.
You're fighting like I mean imagination's good to like make your to practice your movements, but like to really like get good really good awareness in the cage, you need a training partner in the environment that you're fighting in.
There's a tremendous benefit to just having someone that you can, again, to your point, you don't need to be throwing strikes, you don't need to be shooting takedowns, just literally just moving around. just essentially establishing the dynamic of like, you're going to be looking to pressure, I'm going to be looking to circle out. And then, role reversal. I'm going to be looking to pressure. Therefore, you're working on, your own actual cage cutting, your offensive cage craft. And, from there, you can have a tremendous amount of growth without actually really opening yourself up to any risk, as well as just there, the cage itself is the crucial element, I think. And it's insane to me how many gyms out there don't actually have a cage in the gym. It's just open mat space.
What's funny is I know a gym specifically, not going to name names, but I know a gym specifically that has a half a cage. Well, mainly because they don't have the space. Mainly because they can't pay for the space. But
yeah, I mean, you got to work with what you got. But I mean, I guess it's better to have half a cage than no cage, right?
Yeah. But yeah, like I think, and another thing, like if you do want to work it alone, I think still working in the cage though, right?
Yeah.
Because at least you're getting that you're understanding where you are in the actual environment you're going to fight in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
like
we got a good question here from James. Why do you guys hate for pound analysis? Oh man.
In a word, because it's reductive. It doesn't foster any meaningful discussion, and it really just waters things down to a pretty nonsensical degree. It's like, just ignoring the ridiculous, extraordinary hypothetical conditions of everyone being the same size. It's like, you're then going to have to make all these other projections if you want it to be in any way accurate. Like, because obviously the bigger guys are going to hit a lot harder and move a lot slower than the little guys. So are you just taking that existing skill set and shrinking it down, scaling it down? Or are you, then making these different kind of like concessions, moving the sliders around a bit so that it would be more representative of what a similarly sized or a smaller sized, similarly skilled fighter would be like? It's very reductive. It's effectively impossible to have any meaningful conversation in a pound for pound sense. And also I find that it like emboldens some of the dumbest people in the space to feel very opinionated.
Yeah, so two things here. So I think James actually means the idiot on Twitter.
Oh, well.
But okay, but it's okay, but I'll give my spiel on why I hate pound for pound. Like, first of all, we have to know why it was made in the first place, right? It's so people could talk about Sugar Ray Robinson. So boxing writers could talk about Sugar Ray Robinson, right? Because if you were to fight a heavyweight, he would lose, right? Yeah, so that's
most
why
likely.
that's why pound for pound was made in the first place. It's talking about your skills. It's not a bunch of accolades. Like everybody talks about this. It's like, why is it your accolades? Is it like what you've accomplished so far? Is it if you're undefeated? None of that is like important in the grand scheme of things. Like we said earlier in the GOAT debate, right?
Yeah, and the only reason that it exists as like a greater scale talking point is because people don't know how to assess skills very well.
Yeah, and they just cop out to accomplishments, right? Or frequency.
Yeah, records, accolades, other like the Khabib shit never got cut. What does that matter in like any other scope or scale? It means nothing,
Yeah. And it's funny that people discuss pound for pound without actually knowing what pound for pound actually means, right?
Yeah.
But according to this idiot on Twitter, pound for pound, I will punch down for this one because I truly do not like this guy. Because
we're aware.
So the reason why I don't like him is because he's a narcissistic douchebag. He cares more about the UFC business, which ironically he himself doesn't understand.
Yeah, well, it's not even ironic. Yeah. That's a natural conclusion. The dude, anyone who's gassing up the business end of the UFC doesn't know shit about business, if we're being honest.
Right, exactly. And like the thing that pisses me off the most is he's always against fighters' health and fighters getting compensated. like that, like you are watching the sport for the fighters. Like we like me and Jesse, we don't. There's some certain fighters we don't like, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, they're giving up their health on the line. They're putting their
Yeah.
health on
They're
the line
risking.
for our entertainment.
Yeah.
So yeah, that really pissed me off. And the thing that rubs me the wrong way about him is that his handle has analysis in it, right?
Yeah.
Like
And he doesn't
do
know
you
what that word
think about
means.
that? Because I have a very long rant about that.
It's to me, it's just a guy trying to intellectualize himself without having to actually do anything intellectualizing. So it's because to define analysis a little bit, it is, somewhat there's some degree of like academic integrity, academic training that's required for it, that requires like a very specific kind of approach. Um, you know, there's actually a great article that I read, I want to say a year ago, about the world of academia, but it used specifically sports analysis as a gateway for people to get into academia. It expands upon like the rigors of performing any kind of like sports specific analysis as a method of like academic thinking. And I think a lot of people who just might not be the brightest, but want to feel like they're smarter than they are, want to, kind of appeal to an authority that doesn't exist, is say, well, I'm an analyst. When it's like, you're not. You're a shit poster who doesn't know his fucking shoes from his feet, And also he likes tennis, so fuck that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like I've said before, like the thing that rubs me the wrong way about him is the analysis in his handle. The reason why is he's given himself a title that misrepresents what he is, which
Yeah,
is a useless
entirely.
piece of shit. And there, so like, and this is what pisses me off too. There are guys like you, Fenyo, Miguel Class, Dan Albert, who puts out beautiful analytical pieces, and they don't have analysis in their handle. And it's also an insult to guys like Dan Tom, who literally grinds out like analytical pieces every week with
Yeah,
actual film study behind it, while this
with genuine
douchebag,
effort and hard work.
yeah, with genuine effort and hard work, while this douchebag sits back and spews out his like weird opinions on like why Mackenzie Dern should be the next title challenger, or why Islam Makhachev should be paid more, or whatever, right?
Yeah, just nonsense.
Just nonsense. Like
But also
for
the
those
tennis.
guys that yeah, yeah. Also the tennis. Like I've been like somebody's reached out to me saying asking me like why this is bullying. Is this bullying? I don't think it's bullying because he's the one acting like a complete douchebag.
Yeah, and also he doesn't seem all that affected by it. I'm a little bit softer on the guy, I think, than you are, just because in my approach is like, all right, this guy's just dumb. So to me it's like I don't really have to devote all that much energy towards him, because it's just like the the nonsense that you spew is not going to affect me in any way. I don't think that there's a tremendous amount of people that are going to be finding this guy's tweets and going, oh, well, you know what? That's a really good point. I think everyone's just kind of going to look at that and go, cool. All right. That's stupid, and move on. But it is just like a very irritating, grating kind of personality to be, just seeing, not even interacting with, just seeing the shit that he says is, very understandable to be annoyed and offended by, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm in the like opposite boat because I think he deserves to be shamed and ultimately not
Mhm.
be taken seriously, like you said earlier, right?
Yeah. I mean, my question is, does anyone actually take him seriously in the first place?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, they
They
shouldn't.
shouldn't like I'm using it as a tool to I'm using it like as a tool to like for entertainment, because if you're not entertaining or informing, you're not doing your job, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a way for me to make fun of him and like and get the engagement that everybody's talking about, right?
And it's funny.
Yeah,
That's the
it's
thing. You have
hilarious.
to, it's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so next question. Man, we spent maybe way too long on that one.
Yes. That is on me for kind of misunderstanding the question, so I'll take
Oh,
the
that's
blame on
okay.
that one.
So Johnny, new face, so welcome. Favorite setups for high kicks?
I mean, I've always been very partial to just like the classic 1-2 high kick, or jab and then kind of feint the cross, throw the high kick. The Rob Whitaker special, as I always called it, but like what's existed in kickboxing forever, what had its little renaissance a couple years ago with Gaethje, Edwards, I think. Just that very simple little interplay, taking example of guys looking to get their head on the outside of the two. But a setup that I've always appreciated, really loved is I think I've even mentioned it in this series before, is TJ Dillashaw's drop shift head kick. So jab, switch your stance, get on that little angle, and then bring up that, what was the lead leg, now the rear leg, comes up really easily, and you're slotting that in at such a, unique new angle. And especially if you're getting guys looking to counter the jab, they're extended right into the path of it. I think that one's really, really sweet. And also, the key element to it, in my opinion, is the jab itself, because you stick that out there and it's in their eyes. So it hides your switch. And I think that's just like, it's not one you're going to be able to make work super consistently, but should you have that in the back pocket, I think that's always a really good option.
And another one that I really liked is something Joanna did to Jessica Andrade, which was, so like, Jessica Andrade likes to parry and slip to that side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like another one, not as cool as TJ's, but it's a jab into step up high kick. Yeah, so like, because Jessica Andrade likes to parry, like completely remove any defense and then slip to that side. You're not gonna knock anybody out with it. You might not knock anybody out with it, but I think
it's not gonna feel good.
It's not gonna feel good. It's definitely gonna off balance them.
Yeah.
Other setups, I think. Jesse mentioned a lot of good ones, like the Robert Whitaker special. I think that one works really well, like in open stance matchups.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean, you can make it work in a close stance matchup as well. Like I think Wonderboy is a good example, because he would often throw his two into the rear high kick, and in close stance matchup, he would just slot it in over the shoulder.
Yeah, and I think another good one, which is pretty underrated, is throw body kicks first, and then look down, kick high.
Yeah, the classic.
The classic, because that's gonna get you more in the lower levels than anything else, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like just looking down, getting them to look down with you, make them defend something else, and then you throw up a high, and then that high kick comes up.
Exactly. I mean, anything, to the much larger scale, like anything where you can get them thinking that something other than the high kick is coming, is a good opportunity to actually land the high kick, if that's not too simplistic an answer. Like feints, different looks can really help set those up. Say for the example of like the 1-2 high kick, like if you get them used to that right hand coming through and they're looking to parry it, they're looking to slip, that opens up your high kick pretty easily, and that's one that's going to be there very frequently. And even if they're just keeping a good guard up, you can just smash that in on the guard.
Even rare setup for a high kick, Masaki no Iri.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so like out of the clinch, like he'll throw a switch knee, and then he'll step back in the opposite stance, and then throw a high kick on the guard.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one, because it springs off super well, and it also catches guys on that kind of offbeat.
And you're playing with like a short weapon, and then you're transitioning to a long weapon, and there's that in between where your opponent is thinking that they're dealing with a short weapon, and then you give them like a really long one, right?
Yep. I would even say that that's almost transitional in a sense, because they're going from that close range to long range, doing that like mental calculus, like reassessing the distance, and that's your way to take advantage before they've actually done that kind of calculation, so to speak.
And another weird setup. This is something I forgot his name, but it's American Muay Thai fighter, really big. He used to do this thing where he'd throw 1-2 low kick, and then on the next one he'll throw a 1-2. So this is from a close stance matchup. So orthodox, and then he'll throw a 1-2, like step out, like square to the step out, like step out where he squares his feet, and then he'll throw the right low kick on the shoulder or on the lead side. Right low kick
Oh
to the
yeah, yeah,
opponent's
yeah.
lead side. Do you know who's I forgot his name, but do you know what I'm talking about?
I do
He used to
not.
do
Do you
this
have
a bunch of times. So he'd take that wide angle,
Mhm.
and then he'd throw the right high kick as he's taking that. He throw that right high kick like sometimes he'd slot it right in between the guard.
Yeah, I can picture the combination itself. I'm trying to think of who it might have been that actually threw it. But
Yeah,
it
he's
doesn't
been
matter.
he's been on Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
but yeah, we'll figure it out. So next, so I think this is so I think we exhausted that question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So next question is from our boy Jin Karsu. Can you explain the difference between methodical pressure and closing the distance in terms of pressure fighting? Hmm.
You want to start with this one?
Yeah, so yeah, I think this is a good question because closing the distance and methodical pressure, two different things. So closing the distance, let's start with what that means. So that means you're going from borders to the pocket as quickly as possible. And it's often the thing that gives up easy counters, like what most MMA fighters do, right? They run in, right? That's closing the distance. So methodical pressure, that's something completely different and something shout out Ryan Wagner is something he talks about a lot. It's and I'm a big fan of is this slow type of pressure where you're moving right at the end of the opponent's reach and you're forcing them to constantly correct the distance and you're focusing more on maintaining your position and not giving up that space. And what you're essentially doing is you're chewing up space slowly until the opponent reaches the boundary. And when the opponent reaches the boundary, we know that's where they have a big disadvantage, right?
Yeah.
So like that's the two definitions I have. Do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I think that pretty much covers it. But I think just the terminology closing the distance, it can relate to a lot of different things. It can relate to, slowly chewing up space rather than like, you know, actual methodical pressure is a little bit different. It's all designed to get guys backing up. Whereas, closing the distance is just going from here to here, right? That doesn't
Yeah,
mean that, it doesn't necessarily relate to the space, to the initiative, to the objective. Whereas, pressure fighting is inherently defined, right? It's the purpose is getting guys backing up to positions where they're much weaker, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. I think that makes sense. And the reason why I like that distinction is because like everybody when they see like a good ring general, they say, oh, they need to close the distance, right? That's like the common
Yeah.
misconception.
Yeah. No, they just need to get the guy backing up.
Yeah, they just
They
need
can
like
close the
yeah.
distance from there.
Hmm. And the reason I like this terminology is because it makes the ring general work at a pace they're not used to, and
Yeah.
more often than not, you'll get them to the boundary, right?
Yeah. Typically, I mean, especially in MMA where guys don't have the best cage craft to begin with.
All right, I think that yeah. Let's move on to the next one. Yeah, uh, synchro. Ooh, synchro. I don't think I've ever asked Ghost this or Jesse. What, in your opinion, is more important, takedown defense or getting back up?
I would definitely say takedown defense just because, in the economy of energy, the economy of motion, energy expenditure, all that kind of things, it's typically going to be a lot more exhausting, a lot more taxing to get up once taken down, as well as, you run the risk of if you're trying to, sit up too quickly, you run the risk of getting a front headlock slapped on you, getting thrown in a guillotine, whatever, or, catching knees, uppercuts, whatever, as you're trying to get up. Whereas takedown defense, that's where you can kind of flip the script a little bit, make it a lot more taxing on them. Should you be keeping your weight on top of them, keeping their head down, doing all that kind of stuff, you're in a much better position to punish their attempts rather than, having to sort of potentially throw yourself into riskier positions to, I guess, save that little bit of energy or to, you know, uh, just not stay down, I guess.
All right, so I actually have a different opinion. So this is where we might actually disagree for the first time.
Oh,
So I'll give cases for both, obviously, but like a hot take, and I know you might disagree, but if I were to choose what to focus on first when somebody is just starting MMA, like in terms of this question, I think getting back up should be the priority because getting someone down and holding them down is really labor intensive if you think about it.
Yeah.
But if you're able to quickly get back up, more often than not, your opponent is going to start to run out of ideas, right? So,
Yeah.
like an example I like to use, somewhat like a fight that you guys might not know about is like I've mentioned this before, but Grundy versus Evloev. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
I definitely have, but I can't remember it off the top of my head, considering it's a Evloev and a Mike Grundy fight. So
Yeah. So Mike Grundy, so he's like I think you know this, but he's more credentialed as a grappler than Evloev is outside of
yeah.
MMA.
Yep.
But in that fight, Evloev kept getting up, and Grundy tried to keep taking him down. And like at the end of the first round, Grundy was gassed bad, and like by the end of the third and second round, or the second and third round, like Evloev would get back up like instantly after he got taken down.
Yeah. Effortlessly.
Yeah, so like that's a good example of like winning a fight just by getting back up, right?
Yeah.
So, but like,
oh, you
yeah,
go.
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, there's definitely limits to it, especially, because Evloev himself is a very strong wrestler, at least in terms of like the core fundamental thing. So he's, going to be a little bit better at keeping his base, that kind of thing, building back up, maintaining, his wizard, stuff like that, than like, the average guy just coming into a gym for the first 6-8 months or whatever. Whereas like, if you're that guy, if you're that brand new white belt or whatever, and someone takes you down and you're not super explosive or anything like that, you don't really have those mechanical fundamentals of like push the head, get the hips back, that kind of stuff. It's going to be a lot harder for you to, start shrimping and doing all that stuff to try and get your feet under you and get back up. Whereas like if you develop a halfway decent sprawl, you can avoid that altogether. That dynamic of having to be the one exerting all that energy to try and get back up. But I do see your point now that you've expanded upon.
And to go to like the reason why takedown defense is good is because like it's important because you can gain advantageous positions without ever have to working to get back up, right?
Yeah. And you can very much make it, because I think it's a lot less energy dependent, to see a shot coming, down block, sprawled, whatever it is that you need to do, limp leg even. These are things that aren't necessarily super energy dependent. And in the example of like someone shoots a double on you, you sprawl, stuff the head, you've got a lot more options. You're keeping all of your weight on top of them. You can transition to the back. You can, just catch your whizzer, catch that little crossface frame as they're looking to get back up. You can throw in your knees. You can, catch an elbow, stuff like that. And I think to me, it's very much, punishing the get up and punishing the shot itself are things that I think can be very, very important in an MMA context. Whereas, if I get taken down and I'm on my ass, just shooting in to try and get up, or, if I'm rushing to get up, they can just snap me down or do something like that, where it's like that inherently to me feels a little bit riskier than being the one that's like in the driver's seat in terms of defense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and like you said, like when you stuff the takedowns and end up in the clinch, you can really punish wrestlers with knees and elbows.
Yeah.
And like that's the thing that we talked about, like transitional striking, right?
Yep.
Like really good takedown defense transitions into transitional striking.
Yeah. And it's much more on your terms, so you can kind of break away more cleanly, without running the risk necessarily of the reshot, as well as like you can maintain that connection on your terms should you want to.
Yeah,
I think that's
kind of
that ties in with initiative a little bit. I think that's why I prioritize it personally.
Yeah, kind of a segue, but like reshot, like one of the high percentage moves in wrestling, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Shout out
But
to Jesse
you won't
Mendez.
Yeah, but you probably won't see that in MMA, right?
No, not typically. Actually, I don't know if I can think of an example off the top of my head, but it's possible.
It is possible, right? I mean, Habib is more like a push the guy to the fence and then recycle position. So like we don't really see like open space shot and then reshot, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so let's sum it all up. So getting up quickly allows you to tire the opponent in the long run, but takedown defense allows you to punish the wrestlers in the clinch. Like gives you advantageous position. So like, what do you think of that, Jesse?
I think that paints the dynamic pretty cleanly because like sort of like all things in MMA, it's a relationship. You have different advantages from one, different advantages from the other. Each has their own disadvantage, and it's it's not to say that one is necessarily better than the other or should be prioritized more. It's just they both exist in the same context, and it's just a matter of kind of weighing the risk reward, the advantages and the disadvantages, and like the situational elements that are playing a factor in any individual moment, I guess.
Yeah, I think that that's a good like we've exhausted that question too. So let's move on. So Johnny, again, what are your favorite feints that can be used frequently? Ooh, you want to start this one off?
I mean, for me, it's like I'll just talk about like my own game because I like little level change feints, little head pump fakes, and of course the little shoulder pump. Just really basic things that you can use in a variety of different ways. You can actually set up a lot of your different strikes with them. You can, set up your takedowns with them. And of course, you can set up that, that gap that widens with the threat of the takedown in terms of the striking. So, show the takedown, you can come up a little bit better, or, show the strikes, you can get in on the takedowns a little bit better. It's, to me, I like to keep it very simple in my own application of my own game. Also, just because I'm really not that good, so I have to kind of use the high percentage basics, right?
Yeah, and I think easy ones like you can add like right away are the head and shoulder feint,
Yep.
the rear hip feint, and level change feint. Right?
Yeah.
Because
rear hip feint I don't use
all.
because I don't kick. I suck at kicking, so
Oh, okay, but
that one doesn't
so like
benefit me.
head and shoulder feint and level change feint, those are good. Those are like those are two good ones, right?
Yeah.
Because like when they start reacting to those feints, you can just step in.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even with a level change, they stop reacting, or they do react, which is bringing their hands down.
Yeah.
You can come up with punches upstairs. So yeah, head and shoulder for me. The three good ones: head and shoulder feint, the rear hip feint, and the level change feint. The reason I like the rear hip feint is because you can spear in.
Yeah.
You
Chew
can
up
coil your
distance.
hips up and spear in, and you're also giving your opponent a threat to think about. So like even if they check, they're at a really big disadvantage because
Yeah.
they've put themselves on one leg, and then I can come in and hit the body. Like
Yeah.
what I really like to do is low kick, and then throw the the rear hip feint, and then come in with like an uppercut, and then right straight to the body.
I like that. I'm
Weird
gonna
one.
try that. I might get
Weird one, right?
dinged in the noggin for it, but I'll try it anyway.
Yeah. Two like extremely high risk
Yeah.
strikes right there, right?
But it sounds like it's cool as shit, and that's what really
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah, as long as
But
you look cool, right?
exactly. One last note on feints, I think, is just like another use, especially, the reason I really prioritize the level change feint is because it also can, disorient their own wrestling. If you're going up and down and up and down, and you have someone that's looking to shoot on you, they're knowing, okay, it might be a little bit harder for me to shoot on them because if your level is lower, it's easier to get your hips back, get your head in, all these kinds of things, as well as all of the above can do a tremendous job in just making guys hesitate, getting that little second of pause where you're getting them thinking. So, should you be the one on the back foot, you can really just head pump a couple of times just to get guys stopping for that split second, circle out, take back the initiative, do a lot of different things that, it doesn't take much energy to just pump your head, and it might yield really useful results, right?
Yeah, and some 500 level stuff here, but for Jesse's level change feints, if you guys key on like when you level change and you key on the guy's opposite shoulder, you can get really good reads from there. So like if you can see if his shoulder's like dipping down low, that strikes upstairs are available. If it's high, your takedown's available. Yeah, so like 500 level stuff there that many of you might forget about.
We'll remind you, don't worry.
Yeah. So next question from Rainiel Yurge. read your article on kick. Oh yeah, read on kicking the wrist. Why is it important to off balance someone?
That's a good question. I like that.
Yeah, that is a good question. So since it's my article, you want me to start this off?
Your article, yep.
Yeah. So so off balancing someone like in any position is one of the best strategies in combat sports. Like I learned this early on from my first MMA coach in 2015. He always said there's two like ultimate strategies in MMA. Like really simple. Can you off balance somebody and can you make them tired? If you can do those two things, you can really give people a hard time. And I think like overall, like when you off balance somebody, especially like when you kick the wrist, they can't attack effectively from that position. Like they have to regain their balance, their stance before they get there. And uh a side thing is it looks good for the judges, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the importance of off balancing is, you know, it translates across a lot of different sports, a lot of different planes. So like in jiu-jitsu, off balancing is huge. In wrestling, off balancing is huge. Just going to be very different applications of that same principle. Kicking the wrist is great at off balancing because, it's keeping guys weight, on their heels a little bit more so because they're absorbing that, and it's also keeping that right hand at home. So or rear hand or whatever it might be, which hand you're kicking depending on the stance matchup. But it's a way of kind of stealing initiative without having to do a tremendous amount of work, and it's creating that extra little layer where they have to kind of compensate to get their stance back to get because if you kick a guy really hard in the wrist, you might get them actually out of their stance where they have to kind of then turn back towards you or just recompose themselves, and that is like a massive opportunity that you can capitalize on. But it's just simply off balancing guys is just giving them one extra thing to do before they can start getting their work done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so I think what's really important, like with the strike specifically, is when you've off balanced somebody like once or twice, they're gonna start thinking about that, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna start dealing. They're gonna start like you said, it's a way to gain initiative. They're gonna have to start dealing with that threat of the high kick to the wrist. Like even though it's not doing a lot, or even though it's not like removing them from consciousness or hurting them, it's like they don't want to be off balance throughout the whole fight, right?
No,
So
it
they're
does.
gonna either start, yeah, they're gonna have to start like backing up. They're gonna have to start like committing like defense to it, which will create more openings.
Yeah. Or they might be looking to cover a little bit more distance so that they're not, at that range to get kicked in the wrist. And then if you're creating this dynamic where they're trying to rush in, you have a million different countering opportunities open for you. So it's again just kind of like taking advantage of those decision making systems, I guess.
All right. So yeah, I think we should move on. So next question from Synchro Wing. What is your okay? What is your opinion on Barry Robinson's rhythm step? Is it important or is it BS?
I will let you answer this one first, and I also have to run a pee
Okay,
really
because
quickly. I apologize.
all right, so Synchro, this is real like I really don't like Barry Robinson, so I think the name's stupid. The way Barry Robinson explains it is extremely dumb. It's a marketing ploy. Like like what a rhythm step is for those of you guys that don't know, like bring your lead foot up to your rear foot and then you're square and then you bounce back into your stance. That's what a rhythm step is. It's a habit. It can be exploited, and the thing is, the reason why I think it's dumb, the marketing ploy, is because it can be used offensively or even draw out your opponent's strikes because you can create a pattern and then break it, right? Like that's what you're doing. Like you're bouncing back and forth from range, from borders to outside of range. And also, Trevor Whitman said this in his instructional series called Secrets to Balance. Like the reset and the rhythm step aren't actually bad things. Like it's the rhythm step is actually a good way to regain your balance without putting all your weight on the back foot and leaning back, which, as you guys know, is a really like bad position in striking. So it's a good way to regain your balance, and and there's high level fighters that use the rhythm step, and one of them is Ilya Topuria. He uses the rhythm step after he uses false entries. Like you can see this against Volkanovski. He'll step in really hard with all of his weight on the front foot, and then he'll bounce back out of range, and that drew out Volkanovski's high kick. And whenever Volkanovski threw his high kick to counter Topuria coming in, like he'd be completely out of position. Elias Anahachi's whole game. Oh, what's up, man? Yeah, so I was talking about the rhythm step. I was saying that it's stupid. Yeah, you heard the whole thing?
Oh, yes, I did. But I think, ignoring the actual Barry Robinson element and, to your point, the kind of like marketing ploy of the whole thing, I do think in some sense, I think also kind of aligned with your thinking is there is a bit of benefit to it. Like, because a lot of fighters, especially earlier in their career, will just kind of do this little rhythm step as a means of like, it's more a tick than anything. It's just like a habit that guys will do, be it resetting, be it, just staying in that kind of rhythm. And it's something that you can read pretty easily and, get some degree of benefit from. But I think overall the framing of it from Barry Robinson in particular is like not necessarily the crux of fighting the way that he wants you to think it is, right?
Yeah, and the thing that annoys me is that like he thinks this is like a complete game changer, right?
Yeah, it's not. It's been there forever.
like what you guys talked about in your podcast with Jabs yesterday, right? Fundamentals is what's going to make you go far, not some like a magic pill like the rhythm step, right?
Yeah, it's like a fad diet almost, where it's like, the way to lose weight is simple. It's, burn more calories than you take in. Every 8 weeks, a new bullshit diet comes out where someone's saying like, just eat meat, just, whatever. What works and has always worked. That's like kind of the fundamentals. Is just, it's going to work regardless of era and whatever else is going on. Whereas like all the dumb shit like rhythm step meta and whatever is going to pop up and people will fall for it. But it's, it's not fundamental, right?
Right. And I think this is another point that I think we need to hammer home is that like if it is a habit, like it's kind of hard to exploit in the first place because it's a small opportunity. It's a small moment in time where they go from where they retract their lead leg and then they bring it out to stance, right?
Yeah, it's a split second.
It's a split second. So like
if you can take advantage, great.
Yeah,
but
great on
don't
you.
count on it.
Yeah. So I think but like if we ignore the Barry Robinson stuff, like the rhythm step does have a lot of like good benefits. Like so I mentioned Ilya Topuria. Another good one is Elias Anahachi, if you know who that is.
I do not.
So Elias Anahachi is a kickboxer. He beat Sintichai in one championship. His whole game is false entries and then a rhythm step. So like he'll bounce in, bounce out, and then he'll kick the lead leg, like, and then pivot out. That's his entire game. Elias Anahachi. So Synchro, look him up, and then you'll see why, like, how the rhythm step is like used in a practical way. A more boring guy is Muslim Salikov. Yeah. His whole game is shoulder and then retreat, right? Like what Jack Black said. Shoulder feint and retreat. The retreat is a rhythm step.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he has attacks off of the rhythm step. So like the rhythm step's just a marketing ploy. Like it's not even something he invented. This step or reset, it's been around since the days of Willie Pep.
Yeah, forever. But I do think that there's some benefit, especially again in like a lower level application where like it does sort of signal the rhythm, the tempo that a guy's going to be fighting at. But again, the higher level you get, the less those things are going to necessarily be like true indicators, the more that, guys can kind of play with that, take advantage of that. So I think, it's something that you can get something out of like observing, but it's not something that I would necessarily prioritize all that highly necessarily.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because like guys will use the rhythm step to establish a pattern and then break it, right?
Exactly, because that's what it's all about, really, right?
Right, establishing patterns and then breaking it, because and that's how you offbeat someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly.
All right, so yeah, let's move on. So Rio asks, okay, so Mackenzie Dern's fans keep saying she could beat Weili if she had good wrestling and striking. I think she should test that theory. How do you see that fight playing out? So, okay, so you can go first because
I
I
think you
really
already
don't
know the
want to
answer
answer
to
this
that,
part.
Rio. I think
Yeah,
you already know the answer. I think that's a fake question and you're trying to drum up some outrage. But
yeah, mainly
yeah,
for
no,
me.
not well for Mackenzie is all I'm gonna say.
Well, let's first start off with like the if she had good wrestling and striking. Well, you could say that about anyone, right?
Yeah,
Like,
literally.
yeah. So like, if fighter A had good striking and wrestling, then they could be really good. That seems really silly, right?
I mean, it's very surface level. It's very reductive. It's very just inaccurate to the actual application of like skills and everything, right?
Yeah, but let's dig a little bit deeper on this. So the funniest argument I see about Mackenzie Dern in general is, and we mentioned this on the Fence Wrestling podcast. Remember,
Yep.
um, if she learned a single takedown, that'll fix all of her problems, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So like, so Mackenzie Dern learning a single takedown that won't fix anything, especially the ones that she has her in open space, or that won't fix her footwork, that won't fix her bad mechanics that she has, and like just like think about this. Like in 4 years, I've pulled up her record right here. In
Mhm.
4 years, she's had one submission finish. Her last submission finish was against Nina Nunes in 2021. When she's actually has been able to take her opponents down, like by dragging them down.
Mhm.
Her
Yeah,
opponents
but
are just good enough to defend and competent enough to defend. And the media paints her as somebody who's unstoppable when it hits the ground, and like when it hits the ground, it's somehow over. And secondly, I'm not going to answer that second part because you know why, real.
it's toddler versus coughing baby.
Yeah, or atomic bomb, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh wait, did I say toddler versus coughing baby? Those are the same thing.
Yeah,
Atomic
yeah,
bomb versus coughing toddler. My
coughing
bad.
babe.
My
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. All right. So Johnny asks, what do you think about Haggerty's fainting and switch hitting style? And when, where do you think it's best to use? Okay, let me put that up. Yep.
I think you should answer this one first, considering you have a lot of reads on Haggerty, I do believe.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, if you Johnny, if you don't know, I did a thread on Haggerty and I converted that thread into an article on Substack, which you can subscribe for free. And I think it's a free article too, so you can read that. But so like overall, Haggerty's fainting and switch hitting style, yeah, I really like it because it's very layered. He actually relies on three different looks on the outside. It's the switch step feint, the lead leg teep, and the inside low kick. And then he uses that to hide his switch hitting. And what's cool about that is he's able to interchange. Those entries are really interchangeable, so it's hard to read when he's coming in. And when it's best to use, I mean, it's best to use on somebody that's just going to stand still, right? Because
Yeah, I mean
it's going to be
everything is
hard to,
right.
yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to use on a guy that's or it's gonna be hard to use on a guy that knows his timing and um knows that his entries are mainly on the tracks. Like that's something about Haggerty uh that most of his like his lower level oppositions don't get, is that if you know all of his entries are like either all the way in and all the way out, but it's hard to read because of the smoke and mirrors that it puts with it. So you got anything to add on Haggerty?
I'll be honest, I'm not the most tuned in on Haggerty himself. I haven't done a tremendous amount of tape study, but to the points you raised, like it does kind of layer pretty well. And I think those, concepts are something that can be applied in a number of different scenarios, feints to hide switches, and then switches as a means of like collapsing distance, creating new planes, new angles, stuff like that. I think it's something that can be applicable in a bunch of different ways once stripped down to kind of the basics. But as to Haggerty's specific application of it, I'm not the most dialed in on him. So I think I'll just trust your answer on that.
Right. And like for Haggerty specifically, like I think one of the things that you can add, like anybody could add, is probably his hand trap. Because his hand trap allows you to draw out the opponent's counter when they don't want the counter. Right? Just pulling down somebody's hand, they're gonna do something.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah,
that's
they almost feel like they have to.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one. I think that's one of the things that you can take away from his game, like right now, like, and you can apply that to any combat sport. The pull down the opponent's rear hand with your lead hand, because you're gonna force that guy to make a decision, unless you're super leg, which he had a elbow lined up for
Yeah,
him.
well, that's the benefit of making reads, right?
Right. Yeah. So yeah. So you don't have anything else to add on Haggerty?
Unfortunately, no. I think I should probably educate myself on him a little bit more than I have
Yeah.
before. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was caught off guard. I was unprepared, so I
That's
apologize,
okay.
Johnny.
Yeah. Like Haggerty's he's a fighter I've done a lot of research on. So yeah, check out that article. It's on phantompunchbreakdowns.substack.com.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. All right. So Doku, never seen this name, so welcome. What is the best setup for a buggy choke? Okay, I'm gonna defer to you because I'm not good at buggy chokes.
I think the best setup for a buggy choke is filling out a job application and just not doing it in the first place. I think buggy chokes are very stupid. So as much as I appreciate the enthusiasm, and I do, they're fun to try and throw up in training, but in real life application, they're pretty useless unless you're like, competing against like absolute trash white belts. You know, like the guys that can actually get buggy chokes at like a ostensibly high level are like the Rotolos, and that's partially just for being such long gangly freaks and also being elite level competitors facing guys in one that really kind of aren't. So I think it's very much like a skill disparity kind of choke, and one where guys have to be making some mistakes for it to really be considered like viable. But I would say focus on some of the more core fundamental aspects rather than like the flashy Instagram shit. And sorry, that's a shitty answer. I don't think buggy chokes are very good or very wise.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, we saw a girl almost armbar herself trying to attempt a buggy choke,
Yeah.
or trying to remember how to do a buggy choke.
Yeah. And there was one of the Russian promotions, ACA, ACB, whatever. Some dude got like knocked out with a slam looking for a buggy choke. And it's just, it's only going to work under very few, very select conditions, as far as I'm aware. Maybe there are some guys who are, reinventing the buggy choke and, working it into a very cohesive, systematic offensive series. If it is, I haven't heard anything about it. I haven't seen anything about it. I think as of now, I don't think the buggy choke is necessarily something that you can incorporate into a very well-rounded or very consistent game.
Yeah, I think we could classify it as more of a gimmick than a
Yeah,
fundamental,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
Because like
If
this
you have a
isn't
good buggy choke, good for you. I mean, if it works for you, it works for you. That's what matters. But I don't think it's the smartest move to be investing a lot of energy into.
Yeah, and you're also hoping the person will get into side control and not know what they're doing, right?
Yeah, it's predicated on being on the bottom of side control
Mhm.
and not really doing anything to kind of work your way to a better position, right? It's just kind of relying on them doing the wrong things, and I don't think that's sustainable, high level, offense necessarily.
Right, and this is something that my first coach told me. Hope is not a strategy, so that's not
Mhm.
something like like looking for the buggy choke or having like a systemized offense with it. It's not something like I would recommend doing because it's not high percentage because you're hoping for the opponent to do something wrong,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, thinking about it a little bit, I mean, maybe there's like a chance where if the guy's inside control, their head's a little bit low, you can start pushing on the head, making it seem like you're trying to get your hips back, and then throwing up the buggy choke. But again, not something I would necessarily incorporate into my training or anything that I'm, working into any kind of series or strategic, um, edifice, I guess.
Yeah, completely agree. Johnny asks, what are your thoughts on Jan's osoto gari trip from striking? And have you got any thoughts from drilling it if you have done it?
I think it's very cool. I think it's one that's clever as well, in that you're not really A, utilizing all that much energy and looking for it, and B, you're not really extending yourself to all that much risk should it miss. As well as, like, it's something that even if you don't get the trip, you might just off balance them enough by sweeping that leg, getting them to have to pick it up, step back. Um, Personally, when I'm working like asotagaris, which isn't all that often, I like to work them in with like other different takedown options. So, should I be looking for like, my Uchimata ankle pick combination? Should neither of those be there? Then I've got that sort of closer connection where I can try and go for the asotagari. Other way around as well. Should you be stepping in and I have that opportunity to kind of look for it? Odds are I'm not going to get it. I don't have a good Sotogari. I think it's a very hard trip to make actually work. But it does afford you, you have some degree of control over their weight, balance, and movement, and that opens up other opportunities. Whereas, that's in a purely grappling context. Whereas in MMA, if it works, great. You just drop someone or trip someone without really utilizing all that much energy. Or should you off balance them, get them stepping back? Well, now you have opportunities to strike where you're, still rooted in your stance and have like a lot more offensive capabilities. Whereas, to our earlier point, they're now in a position where they have to kind of recompose themselves before they can do anything.
Yeah, I think so. I actually did an animation on this, on Jan's osoto gari trip on Davis and Figueiredo. But my thoughts on it, it's really cool because you're getting like a really advantageous position, like if you do execute it, and if you don't execute it, you've made the guy step back. And I think that's a really like you've got good options from there. And like thoughts on drilling it if you have done it. I mean, for me, I'm not good at I'm not good at doing it the Jan's way, but like
No.
in like regular wrestling, like for me, it's not really one of the things that I work on. I'm more of like a meat and potatoes guy when it comes to wrestling, like just single into back body lock, maybe turn the corner on a double leg. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, drilling it, I'm not that good at. I wish I was good at it, but yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
it's
that
one
good
I'll
at it.
mess around with, but I'm not very good at it either. I think it requires like a really keen kind of eye for that distance, for that right. I think that there's a tremendous amount of like possibility, and if you're able to kind of time the step well, managing that weight transfer of your opponent. But for me, it's not something I'm good at, so it's not something I've really theorized on all that deeply, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, me neither. But it is definitely cool. Like, and the
Very
way
cool.
Peter Yan sets it up is really cool because he does that weird thing where he'll throw the side kick as a, or he'll throw the side kick to the knee, right?
Hmm.
And if it
And then,
misses, he's
yeah,
in position to do the Osotogari, which is dope.
yeah, yeah, very, very clever, very crafty, but
Yeah,
it's cool.
yeah. Would you consider this a high percentage move? Because
Uh, I mean, not necessarily. I think, you know, to the point of Jan, it's something that he has kind of made a decently high percentage move for himself. But overall, in terms of like, if I were trying to coach someone or build someone's skill set up, it's not something I would necessarily invest a whole lot of energy into, because it is something that you know you either just kind of have a natural feel for, or you have to really, really, really work it. And I think like the reward is not all that high to justify that level of like effort and training. Whereas like, because that's taking away from some of the more fundamental stuff. Some of the time you could be committing to what I consider like more high probability stuff.
yeah, completely agree. Yeah, that looks like it's all. That looks like it's all the questions. So
Yeah,
man,
I mean,
we spent almost 2 hours on this, man. This is some good
yeah,
stuff.
thank you guys so
Yeah,
much. This is a lot more than I think we had anticipated, and I thought we got some really good stuff in there.
yeah, like yeah, awesome guys. Like hopefully we can do this soon.
Yeah.
So all right. So any plugs, Jesse?
I got nothing. If you haven't heard, put out an episode of the Locker Room Bonus Show with Muay Thai Jabs yesterday, and obviously the Fight Mind series with Ghost and I, all on the same Spotify channel as well as Ghost YouTube. You can find my writings at combatwrapup.substack.com. And obviously, I'm on Twitter where I be talking shit. So, great chatting with you guys. Great chatting with you, Ghost. And I thought this was really awesome.
All right. Yeah, good stuff, guys. Peace. See ya. Have a good one. All right, man. That was some